Let's make a dish for National Dairy Month. Hey guys, welcome back to At the Table. Sydney here, and it is June, so we're going to be talking all about National Dairy Month today. We do have a really delicious recipe that is one of my all-time favorites that uses milk in it, and also some other healthy ingredients, of course, as well. And this is a super versatile recipe. You could change it up a little bit based on what you have, and then also it's really fast. It doesn't take long at all. The only thing that might take a little while is the chopping, that part of it. There's not a ton that we're gonna chop though. So it's really a pretty quick and easy recipe that you could make at home, and it has some dairy in it. So we're gonna be talking all about dairy today. So what we're making is a salmon chowder recipe, and I am not personally much of a seafood chowder person, but this recipe to me is just, it tastes so good. It's just like, it really just fills up your soul. It's just delicious. So we are gonna go ahead and get started with some of the ingredients here. We have celery and carrots and onions that we'll be sauteing all of that together for just a little bit of flavor, add some vegetables to it, and then we'll be adding a few other ingredients. So we'll start with the celery first, and I'm gonna cut off this top part. You can absolutely use this for a recipe. Sometimes I like to just go ahead and cut that up and throw it. Actually, you know what? We're gonna do that because I think it would look nice in our chowder anyways, just with the pretty leaves. This, of course, will still cook down anyways. So you could, I think we'll only use about half of the leaves. It's not like there's gonna be a bunch of leaves just kind of swimming in your celery or in your chowder. But I like it just for a little bit of, makes it look pretty. So we'll use about half of that and then use the rest of the stalks. For the rest of we need about 1/3 of a cup of this. And push that on the side. So we're only gonna use this much. So as I mentioned, it is National Dairy Month, and dairy has absolutely gotten a really bad rap over the past couple years. We've seen a lot of people not consuming as much dairy anymore, and it's not necessarily because of a intolerance or an allergy. It's just kind of personal choice. But dairy actually is really, really good for us, and it has a lot of great nutrients for our body. So it is something that is 100% part of a healthy diet. Since I've been pregnant, I've been trying to have a cup of milk at least every day or every other day, just because of the nourishment that it provides to my little growing baby boy that's coming. So whenever you're consuming dairy, you are getting, in terms of comparing it to some of those other milk options out there, the protein to fat ratio and carb ratio, all of that is actually really, really great. A lot of athletes actually use like chocolate milk to fuel after a workout because of the protein that it provides, and then the carbohydrates that you get, especially when you add in something like chocolate for a chocolate milk. It gives athletes what they need to repair those muscles after they have been being so strenuous on their bodies. So you don't get that with most of our other alternatives, because there are a lot of dairy alternatives out there. The best one, if I were to compare the different ones and you were to actually look at the nutrition facts panel and look at them side by side, where's the protein at, how much carbs are in these, where are we at with fat? Our oat milk has become pretty popular, and it is a good alternative, or soy milk is another one that is a good alternative as well, because soy has that protein in it. Now people, I think, also kind of give soy a bad rap, or soy has a bad rap as well. People are a little bit scared to ingest soy. So soy is perfectly healthy and perfectly good for you as well. Save that for another day. But if you're really comparing those, milk is still going to be your best option in terms of what you're getting. You get the biggest bang for your buck with dairy milk. So we get 13 different essential nutrients from consuming dairy. And the big one that we of course think of, I think back when I was little and they had the Got Milk campaign back then, the big one is that calcium, and we think about building strong bones. So we get a ton of calcium from milk, and actually most of the calcium that Americans consume in the food supply comes from dairy products versus other things. Now there are certain vegetables that have a lot of calcium as well. Broccoli is a wonderful source of calcium, but it does not compare in terms of the amount of broccoli you'd have to eat to the amount of milk you would have to drink. You'd have to drink significantly less milk to get that same amount of calcium versus the amount of broccoli you'd have to eat to get that. So I'm gonna finish chopping this up a little bit more finely. We want it to be nice and minced so it's all blended with our chowder, and I'll see you guys back in just 1 second.
Star Communications strives to provide you with the best video services. That's why we invested in cutting-edge video equipment to bring you new features such as Cloud DVR, Restart TV, local video on demand, advanced parental controls, and higher quality reception. Unfortunately, these improvements require some changes, and existing DVR customers will lose their current recordings. Changes will start the middle of January, so please view all your recorded content. We hope you will love the new Star TV.
Hey guys, welcome back. So we've got our celery and our carrots all chopped up. So what we're gonna do is we are just gonna add a little bit of olive oil to our pot here. I do have the pot on medium heat. So, you know, we don't want it super high. We're just gonna saute this up. So this is about 1/3 of a cup of, might be a little bit extra, but that's all right, of celery, and about 1/2 cup of carrots. So I'm gonna dump that into our pot here. Try not to make a mess. And we're also gonna add some onions. So I already had some frozen onion. That has been something that I have utilized a lot recently just because I struggle so bad with my eyes when I chop up onions. But frozen, you can either buy the pre-chopped frozen onion, or you can chop onion yourself and freeze whatever extra you have to use in a dish later. I do this a lot just because I might not need an entire onion in something I'm making. So you can actually pull it straight from the freezer and throw it into your pot. The only thing you want to keep in mind is that it might cook a little bit slower, but onions tend to cook pretty fast as it is. So it's not really a huge concern that it's not going to get cooked down to the point that you need it to. So I might actually turn our pot up just a little bit higher since we want it to saute really nicely in there. And I'm just mixing that around in the oil. We're going to let that saute and cook down for about 4 minutes. So what the other things that we have for our recipe today, we have smoked salmon. Now this is ready to eat. It's prepackaged. You can buy it in kind of where like the imitation crab meat and the actual crab salad, things like that are in the grocery store. So it is refrigerated. And they basically just go ahead and smoke it, and they do add salt to it to help preserve it. So this does have a good bit of sodium in there because they add salt for preservation. We're not going to add a ton of salt to our dish anyways, so I think it will be perfectly okay for this recipe. So we're also going to be adding just a few seasonings. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. We're gonna add a little bit of cayenne pepper, not a lot, so it's not gonna be overly spicy, about 1/8 of a teaspoon. So that's really, I mean, you're just doing a light sprinkle, and that'll just give it a little bit of a pop of flavor. If you like things hotter, you could adjust this and go even hotter with your cayenne. And then that way it would be a little bit more spicy for you. Then we're just gonna do a sprinkle of salt in there as well. It says about 1/2 teaspoon. You guys know, one of the things that I like to do is add salt later in the cooking process so that it won't, the flavor won't cook out, and that way we still taste the salt, but we don't necessarily keep adding more and more salt to our recipes. Really, when we talk about sodium and sodium intake, a lot of that is not due to the salt we're adding here while we're cooking. It's typically in items that are prepackaged that we purchase. So if we're buying a lot of things like this that are prepackaged, prepackaged salmon, then if we have the prepackaged rice, for instance, we're gonna be using this today, and this does have a seasoning packet that goes with it, which we are not using the seasoning packet. But if we were, the seasoning packet would definitely contribute to the sodium that is in that dish. And then any other kind of pre-made foods that we might be buying, a lot of those have higher sodium. So just keep that in mind. We're not quite as concerned when we are here in the kitchen unless you have a health condition where you need to watch your sodium. Okay, so I'm gonna add 2 cups of water here. So we are just going to let that come to a boil, and then we're gonna reduce it and finish the rest of our ingredients. Now, the other things that I wanted to talk about pertaining to dairy is there are a couple nutrients that are very, very important for us that we have found are a public health concern because Americans are not consuming enough of those. And 3 of those are actually found in dairy products. So that is calcium, vitamin D, and phosphorus. When we think about calcium, I actually just did a lesson not too long ago with children about this, but when we think about calcium, we think about those bones and how it helps to build those strong bones. Of course, that's what we always think about when we were younger. You were told to consume calcium, to consume milk for the calcium. So as we age, our bones do tend to get more brittle. And if you're a woman, you tend to be more likely to have osteoporosis than a man. So it's even more important for us to up that calcium and continue building those nice, strong bones. And you can get a lot of that, about 20% of our calcium in the American diet comes from dairy products. It's a great place for you to get that calcium in and help keep those bones nice and strong, and that will help to reduce, as we start to age, your risk of, if you fall, breaking a hip, breaking another body part, and of course that can be really dangerous as we begin to age. So keep those things in mind. We'll talk a little bit more about vitamin D and potassium when we come back, but I'll see you guys back in just 1 second.
Just because something may work doesn't mean it's right for your business. Let Star Communications' knowledgeable consultants help you customize a hosted voice system that's right for you. Our dedicated experts work with you to understand your business needs and guide you at every step, from choosing and installing services to ongoing maintenance and support. Contact Star today.
All right, guys, welcome back. Our veggies are done. They're nice and sauteed. They've been cooking up for about 8 minutes. So that does take a little while to just cook those down to get nice and tender, because once you've done that, there's really not a whole lot left to do. We're gonna stretch it out a little bit just for the show, but it's really, this is a quick and easy recipe. So what we're gonna do next is, this is where our dairy comes in. So we're gonna add in some whole milk. Now, usually I use 1%. I have made this recipe before, and we have used 1% in the past, and it was so good. I mean, it still was not lacking in flavor or anything like that. With the whole milk, you get some of that good fat in there that we're not really getting a lot in this dish. There's not a whole lot of, it's not a very fatty dish in general. So if you just don't want to buy whole milk, because that was my situation in the past, we don't drink whole milk at home. I usually drink 1%. So for us, it was something that if we weren't really going to use it, there wasn't a point in me buying a whole thing of it. You could just use whatever you have on hand. Now, if you want to replace some of the fat that you're missing in your dish because you've not put the milk in there, not use whole milk, you could do something like butter, add a little bit of butter to it, and that would help to give it a little bit of that fat that you were missing. Now, it still might not be quite as creamy, so just keep that in mind. So what I'm doing right now is I had that whole milk. I'm also adding a little bit of flour. So we just did 2½ tablespoons of flour, and I'm just gonna whisk that up really good. This will help to thicken and get that chowder consistency that we want. So I'm gonna add this to our pot, and we want to bring this to a boil. So I'm gonna pump this up just a little bit higher, but we want this to come to a boil and just to boil for about 1 minute until it's nice and thick. So, like I said, after you've done the veggie process, you've got this, then you chop up your salmon. You can add some green onions on top. You're gonna add in rice that's already been cooked, and it's pretty much done from that point. I have also made this recipe before in an Instant Pot or any type of electric pressure cooker if you have one of those at home. So you could definitely go that route if you want to. The only thing with that is we typically don't put dairy products, milk, mostly milk. You could probably put maybe some cheese. Be better to save that for the end anyway. But usually we don't add those dairy products until the end of the cooking if you're doing something like an electric pressure cooker, simply because it comes to such high pressure, it cooks so quickly, you could potentially have the risk of your dairy products curdling, your milk curdling. So we would probably add that at the end if you use an Instant Pot, and then you could, just let it sit for a few minutes to kind of thicken up and warm up and all of that, and it would be ready to go. So I have also made it that way before, and it was maybe 5 minutes in the electric pressure cooker, so very quick and very easy. So we're starting to kind of come to a boil. I'm gonna let that keep doing its thing. While it is doing that, I wanted to tell y'all about those other 2 essential nutrients that we get in those dairy products. So those were vitamin D and potassium. Now, vitamin D is super important because it helps your body to absorb the calcium that you're consuming. So when you're drinking or eating your dairy products, you are getting the calcium, and then you're also getting that vitamin D that will help you to absorb that. So that is critical, that when we are consuming calcium products, we are having that vitamin D component in there to help with that. You get, I believe it was about 40% of American diet gets their vitamin D from dairy products. So we get a lot of our vitamin D in our diet from dairy. We also want to keep in mind vitamin D is one of those nutrients that are important because they also help to keep those bones from getting brittle. And without vitamin D in the diet, and this is why it was added to the list of nutrients that are kind of a public health concern at the moment, because Americans aren't getting enough vitamin D as it is, and we are starting to see more of those brittle bones because of the lack of vitamin D. Now, you can get vitamin D from the sun. However, if it's through a window, we don't absorb as much. And then we also want to be mindful of other things that are in the air, like smog or debris or things like that can kind of interfere with your absorption of vitamin D. So food is a great way to get that nutrient in because we don't have to worry about, are we really absorbing enough when we're outside in the sun? So vitamin D is super important for us, and we want to make sure we are getting that in. This has thickened up. We're going to take a short break, and we'll see you guys back to finish this up.
Let's get out of here.
Protect what matters most in your life with security from Star Communications.
All right, welcome back, guys. So I'm actually going to turn our stovetop off just because that is definitely thickened, and it's going to stay nice and hot as it is when we add these last two ingredients. So what we have left is rice. I've got a cup of that rice that I showed you before that I'm going to add in. This is long grain and wild rice. So you could do any rice here. You could do just brown rice if that's what you have. You could do just wild rice if that's what you have. I like the mixture of brown and wild. However, I couldn't find that already packaged together in the grocery store, and I didn't have any brown rice already cooked up. Sometimes I do have brown rice cooked up and in the freezer. So another thing that you can freeze ahead of time, but I just bought this one. This is going to be your mixture of wild rice and your like white rice. Now, your wild rice is considered a whole grain. So by doing that, we're getting half of those grains are whole that's in this recipe, which is really great for that fiber. So what we're going to add next is our salmon. And I'm going to add this whole entire package of salmon. So we want about 3 ounces, 3.5 ounces or so, which ends up being just 1 pack of your smoked salmon. As I said, this is ready to eat, so you could pull it straight from your refrigerator, and sometimes you see that with like your breakfast sandwiches, your bagels. They might have cream cheese and salmon on top. And it smells really good. You can smell that smoky flavor. And I believe there is some smoked salmon that is not necessarily refrigerated, and it may have just a little bit more of that sodium added to it because it's a shelf-stable product. So keep that in mind. This is just, I've used this brand before, I've used this kind before, and it had really good flavor, and it was the amount that I needed. So again, we were looking for about 3 to 3.5 ounces. And I believe when I looked previously for the kind that was not refrigerated, it wasn't quite as much. I would have needed to purchase more of that in order to fit into my recipe. So if you love salmon, you could do extra in this. I think it would be good. Honestly, to me, this amount gives it that flavor that you want, and you still have plenty of salmon in there in your dish to eat. This recipe makes 4 servings, so it doesn't make a ton, but it is, again, really good, really hearty, and it will definitely fill you up because of everything that's in it. So we're going to throw our salmon in there, and we'll let that heat up while I do my last preparation, which is going to be cutting up some green onions to kind of sprinkle on top. You could omit those. We've got regular onions in there as well. So if you just want to skip that step, you can, but I think it makes it look really, really pretty when you have that green onion on top. All right, so I'm gonna just stir that up so that it can all kind of get blended and be nice and warm and ready to eat. If you are pregnant, as I am, you need to keep in mind that we do want to heat all of our foods to 165 just to protect us from that foodborne illness. It's a little bit more dangerous as we are now immunocompromised when you're pregnant. So that's going to get nice and heated as we let it sit and be safe for me to eat after this. All right, so last thing is those green onions. And I always just like to chop off the top, especially if they just don't look very pretty. And we're just doing enough to sprinkle here. So not a ton. That last thing that I wanted to mention was potassium that we get in our dairy products. And again, we're talking about this because it's National Dairy Month, and I just love talking about dairy because it's so delicious, so good for you, and I think a lot of people just have a little bit of fear mongering that's happened out there that's made them afraid to eat dairy. So potassium is actually really important for all of our cell functions. It helps for the processes in all of our organs. Everything going on in our body, we need potassium in it, or we need potassium to help with that cell function. So that is so that your cells can properly do what they have to do. So potassium is very, very important because of the fact that it makes up so much of what our body can do, how our body functions. So we do get some potassium with our dairy products as well. So that makes it a very healthy thing to have. So we get those really important nutrients that we are lacking in our diet as Americans, and we get that just from our dairy products. So don't be scared to try dairy. It's good for you. It tastes good. If you have a lactose intolerance, you can choose the lactose-free dairy and you still get all of those benefits that I've mentioned today. So drink more dairy, eat more dairy, enjoy it, and I will see you guys back next time for At the Table.